read that when you're quite young and you're moving around, you lived in Ethiopia and Sudan.
Yeah.
I found that extraordinary.
Yeah.
How was that experience for you?
Yeah, I mean, my father was a United Nations civil servant. Actually, initially after the war, he fought in the war. He fought, interestingly, in the war. He arrived in Kenya and then went up in a military action through north to Somalia to, I can't remember which army it was, under Cunningham, I think, to take back Italian Somaliland. And then after that he went to North Africa and Italy. He spent most of the war in Italy. After the war he joined the colonial service. He wasn't a career military officer, he joined the colonial business and was posted initially to British Guyana, and then he went to Malaya, where I was born. I was born in Malaya in 1955. Malaya got independence in 57. My father was very close friends of the first Prime Minister of independent Malaya, Tunku Abdul Rahman, and had formed a very close bond with him. And the Tunku asked my father to stay on as an economic advisor. My father was a specialist in development economics, and he stayed on Malaya for 2 years. But the Tunku then said, listen, my father was Oscar. He said, Oscar, if you want to stay, I'd love you to stay working here, but realistically, the country's a new country. If you want to stay working here, we don't mind if you're a white guy, but we need you to take Malaysian citizenship. My father said, listen, it's very difficult for me to relinquish my British citizenship. And so Tunku said, well, then you better get yourself another job. So he joined United Nations in 1960, and I was 5 years old, and his first post was in Khartoum. So I remember very, very well arriving in Khartoum as a 5-year-old boy. And I loved it. There were virtually no white people there. I had to learn Arabic. Our next door neighbour on one side was the mayor of Khartoum, Osman Manat, who are a very nice family, whose eldest son Omar became my best friend. He didn't speak any English, I didn't speak any Arabic, but I learned Arabic pretty quickly. And our next neighbour, the other side, was Talat Farid, who was Vice President, General Talat Farid, had a lot of children. And so I love Khartoum. I remember it. I don't remember it as being hot. In fact, I remember the reverse. My father installed air conditioning in one of his rooms in the home, the first air conditioning in our house in Sudan, and he used it for his study, and I would go into the study and think it was the most horrible room. Why would you want to be in a place as cold as this, And so I used to go to school every day. I promise you this is true. I used to go to school in Khartoum. There's a tiny little English school. Every day on my donkey, unescorted, my donkey Violetta, and then I'd come home and I'd park my donkey Violetta in a friend's house nearby with some water under a tree in the shade. Then I'd go to school, come back with my donkey. I loved Sudan, I loved Khartoum, I loved the Arab, I would sit for Ramadan, I would go and sit with our servants, sitting there waiting it was lovely. It was an innocent world where there was no sense of Christianity and Islam, and no, of course all our servants were.
How's your Arabic so far?
I'm sadly after I left Sudan in 1965, I was 8 years ago, I was sent to school in England.
Yes.
No, nobody there spoke Arabic. So I can only tell you how awful it was to go from living in Sudan to being sent to a boarding school in England, where the weather was awful. You must have been to England many times. So I arrived in England in October to go to boarding school in England, having lived in Sudan, where sunny every day, warm every day. You don't, if you wear shorts every day, you don't wear shoes, you run around barefoot. So I hated England. I have to tell you, and I found it I couldn't understand why people would want to live in a country where it was wet all the time. But it had to be. So I was in boarding school in England. I learned to work the system. 1965, my father was posted from Khartoum to Addis Ababa. Addis Ababa, completely different. Ethiopia, completely different country than Sudan. The Ethiopians are culturally very different. Of course, it's a mainly Christian country. Sudan is a totally Muslim country. Racially quite different. Mountainous as well. Addis Ababa is 6,000 feet, mountains. my mother was a linguist. She spoke Arabic well, and she learned Amharic well. I was at boarding school in England, so I went back and forward on vacation. I loved Addis Ababa very much. I mean, Ethiopia was, I think, a fascinating country. Had obviously Haile Selassie was king, and although Ethiopia had very briefly been colonized by the Italians, only very briefly, it didn't feel as if it had ever been colonized. The Ethiopians had really had a very distinct sense of their own identity and pride. Haile Selassie, personally, I think was a good leader. Actually, I know he was later murdered, but I think no leaders are perfect, and I'm not suggesting he's perfect, but overall I think Haile Selassie was a beacon overall for good, not for bad. I loved my time in Ethiopia. Our friends there were very mixed.
Right.
They weren't just British. There was a British community there, but my closest friends were a Somali guy and an Armenian guy. And we had Ethiopian friends, we had Greek friends, Italians, Armenians, French. It's very, very multicultural. I really enjoyed that. I never came to Kenya then, but everyone talked in Addis Ababa about Nairobi as if Nairobi was the capital of the world. If someone was going to Nairobi, they'd say, "Please, can you bring me back some jam?" If there's any chance to buy some butter or ham. Nairobi is, I guess, the same as if you live in nowhere in England. People talk about London in the same way. So I formed this impression of Nairobi being this beautiful, wonderful, glorious city. I left. I left school. I went to university. I was lucky. I went to Oxford University in the UK. I studied physics. I always wanted to work in the financial industry. So initially I worked in the stock market. I started work a long time ago, 1976. I've been working now 42 years. Still. I worked in the stock market, which I loved, in London. But those were in the bad days when we still had exchange control. We still had exchange control. It was still a socialist government. The UK was an economic mess. You're much too young, but any of your older friends would remember the UK in the mid-70s. Winter of discontent, 3-day week, the economy a mess. Headlines in the Sun newspaper, will the last person to leave, please switch the light out. We had big net emigration then. People were leaving the country, go to Australia, United States, anywhere. UK was considered a basket case. Stock market had been a disaster zone, but recovered because it's so cheap. And then Margaret Thatcher came in, elected in 1979, really changed the world for Britain. She immediately removed exchange control. Suddenly there's a flood of confidence in Britain, and she began to transform the UK economy. She privatised these rubbish industries that were in state control, the steel industry, coal, and many others, British Airways, and the UK economy started to perform very well, and she instituted a lot of trade union reforms, lower taxes, reduced corporation tax, capital gains tax, motivated people to employ, and the economy in the UK since then pretty much has been transformed. I did a few different jobs in finance, and then in 1986 I started my own business called Intercapital. It was called Intercapital originally, it then changed its name to ICAP in 1986. It was a broking firm based in London only. We had 4 people only when we started. It was a tiny operation, and we were specializing in a new area of financial markets called over-the-counter derivatives, OTC derivatives, specifically interest rate swaps. This is a very piece of financial engineering around the transfer of long-term interest rate risks. A truly innovative piece. I mean, everyone thinks that new innovation in finance is bad and dangerous, and some of there are some things that are invented that are toxic, and that I agree. The packaging of bonds, where the loans are made to people with no assets and no income, which is one of the reasons behind the financial crisis. was clearly a very bad construction, but the interest rate swap market was a very positive construction, allowed corporations and governments to transfer risk very, very efficiently and improve the construction of the capital market. So our tiny little business specialized in this tiny specialist area. What I didn't realize is this tiny specialist area was going to go through a period of 10-year boom. And ICAP started in 1986 with 4 people. In 10 years, we had grown to about 300 people, and we were one of the most profitable firms in our area in London. We were very successful, still a boutique, but we were a very profitable, successful boutique. And we did a lot of different products, related products, not just in interest rates, but also by then in commodities and in emerging markets, and also in lots of different currencies, not just sterling or dollar. We were in yen and Deutschmark, and obviously the euro was coming. And we did some, the history of the firm is quite well known in the UK. We did some smart things. We prepared properly for the arrival of euro. And then just over 10 years ago, we went public. It was a private company till then. We went public, and I took over in successive years. I took over 2 listed companies in Britain. One was called Exco, which is a long-established money broking firm. The other was called Garban, which is really a strong American firm listed in London. And in 3 years, between 1997 and 2000, ICAP, which had been this small little startup, which many people didn't succeed, was the biggest wholesale broking firm in the world. We had nearly 5,000 staff. We had 60 offices around the world. It was a really amazing achievement. And in 2006, we went into the FTSE 100 index, which is the FTSE 100 index is the benchmark index in the UK. It's like talking about the S&P 500 in the United States or whatever. They've got an index in the Nairobi. So this small firm. It's quite and very, very unusual for a chief executive for a FTSE 100 to have been the founder of the business. I had a very, very fortunate and lucky career. But going back to Kenya and why I'm here, when I started working in the late 70s, my father's final job on retirement after he left Kenya, he went for 6 years to the Seychelles. After he left Kenya, sorry, after he left Addis Ababa, went for 6 years to Seychelles. And in the very early 80s, I flew out to the Seychelles to visit him with my then girlfriend, and we stopped off in Kenya for a few days. I'd never been to Nairobi. We stopped here for a few days, went up to the Aberdare, stayed in treetops, which I'll never forget, and it was my reintroduction to Kenya, and it really triggered a flame in me of reminding me of my African background, and I immediately liked Kenya. I didn't come back here for a long time until the mid-90s, when I had children of my own, and they were at boarding school, and the boys were at boarding school, and one of the other fathers who was there, I knew Kenya very, very well. He'd been in the army, he'd been trained here, and I was talking about it, and I said, I really want to take my wife on holiday to Kenya. And he said, I'll tell you where you must go. You must go to Laikipia. I've got some friends up there. You'll have a wonderful time. I took my wife, my then wife, I've since got divorced and remarried, on a surprise holiday to Laikipia, to a place called Lewa, which is very well known now. And we had a magical holiday, unbelievable holiday, fantastic. And because it was such a success, and we liked the people, we liked the area, we started coming back pretty much every year, brought our children loved it. My 2 sons, when they're gap year, they worked over here, and so all my 3 children have come to Kenya very many times. They've got friends here, they love it as much as I do. And in the early 2000s, I had a pretty successful and lucky business career. I was beginning to thinking of buying a property here in Kenya, and obviously I was looking around Laikipia. I very nearly bought a ranch, but probably with hindsight, I thank God I didn't. I don't speak Swahili, I don't know the politics, but I finished up doing a deal on a property called Borana, which is immediately on Laikipia, next to Lewa. It's a beautiful property, Borana Ranch. and I bought a share of Borana Ranch from the family who own it, and it's a conservation ranch. They do very little cattle. It's really about,
I've been there.
yeah,
Yes.
properly magnificent.
Yeah.
Properly magnificent. And so we built a house on Borana Ranch, and we built it. So I got divorced I got separated, I should say, 10 years ago, 2008. And divorced then. Very sad episode, but these things happen. And I started going out living with a girl who I'm now married to. She was called Sarah Milford Haven, now she's Sarah Spencer. You meet her in a minute. And I brought her to Africa, to Kenya for the first time, almost exactly 10 years ago. In January, we came here for our first holiday when we started living together. I flew her to Kenya for New Year 2008, 2009. And I remember it extremely well. Of course, we stayed the night at the Norfolk Hotel. We arrived in the evening, stayed the night at the Norfolk Hotel, then went down to Wilson Airport, and pilot friend of mine, Ben Simpson, was rating with his helicopter.
Sounds romantic.
It is romantic. My wife flies helicopters. She used to fly a lot, doesn't fly very often. So we had the dual controls in. I was sitting in the back, and we flew down to Eldonia Was, down southeast Kenya, near the Tanzanian border. You can see Kilimanjaro, and we had a really nice time there. And then we flew up from there to Laikipia, and we stayed on Borana in one of the old houses there, Laragai, and just the two of us. It's a big house. Normally you've got 20 people staying, so I rented it just for the two of us. Beautiful house, owned by some friends. We've become friends of us now. And we had a few really magical days there. And I said to my wife, I said, my darling, I want to share with you one of my dreams. And she said, what is that? Because I said, I want to build a house in Kenya. Yeah. She looked at me like, what? What has come over you? We're here on holiday. You know, it's kind of nice. What do you mean you want to build a house here? I said, no, I really want it. It's in my soul, you know, it's my soul. So she looks at me like I'm an idiot. I said, come on. And to her credit, we together built a house. We chose a site on Borana. There was nothing there before. Zero. Nada. Beautiful site. High up on a ridge. Straight view south on Mount Kenya. Straight view north over the Borana plain. We found an architect, South African architect. We found builders, constructors. We got a project manager, and we built the house in 2 years. And it has given us such pleasure. The house is called Sirai, Sirai, named after Euphorbia tree, and we love that house. We go there a lot. We travel over here a lot. It's a magical place. It's a place of beauty, of serenity, of calm, nice people, wonderful wildlife. It's a privilege and a pleasure to be there. So my wife, having been very skeptical of Africa 10 years ago, has now become a Kenya-phile. I promise you, the first thing she'll say, is, when are we coming back? I think we should come back in May, as she'll be saying to me later today. So we come here a lot. We built a house now on the coast as well, in Kilifi. My wife is keen on horses, and she recruited by good fortune a girl called Venetia Phillips, who has run our horse breeding program up at Sirai for 10 years. We started with 3 horses, then 6. Now I think we've got 42. She's been incredibly successful at breeding and selling horses into the safari market, not the racing market. The safari market, and increasingly the polo market. Polo is very popular in Kenya. I don't play polo personally, but there are a lot of polos in increasingly popular sports. So we breed, and we also now are importing semen for artificial insemination, which you can do for polo ponies and safari ponies you can't do for racehorses. So we've had a very successful little stud farm there. And then last year, Venetia and Sarah, my wife, went down to South Africa and bought 3 South African bred racehorses for racing in Nairobi. And 2 of them are colts, boys, and 1 is a filly, girl. The 2 colts have been unbeaten in 11 races, and they are racing head to head for the first time ever today in the Derby, and we are very excited at what the outcome will be. I'll show you some of the trophies my wife has run so far. It is she's won those 4 trophies. I mean, they're unbelievably beautiful. I mean, that is the Uhuru Cup. I mean, that's big. It's big this side, okay? It's solid silver. I mean, of course, we give it back after a year. I'm astonished they give it. It's beautifully made. The Uhuru Cup that was given out on the race. The race was first run on Independence Day in 1963, and the first cup was given out by President Kenyatta. So, I mean, it's like we own a piece of history. Well, we don't own it. So we are very excited to be here in Kenya. We're very excited to spend time here. I may well expand my business interests here. I've been contemplating making some real estate investments in Kenya. But it's a country we love, we enjoy, and we support.
How long do we have for this? I think we have half an hour.
Yeah.
I'll let you have breakfast. So
don't worry, I'm not out of breakfast.
Right. So let's very briefly philanthropy, which is something you've done for a bit. I'm curious always as to when this starts, this bag of philanthropy starts. Is it what instigates it? What sparks you say, look, I want to give back?
We, the firm that I started, ICAP, many years ago, in 1993. So when we literally, only a few years after we started, set up something called Charity Day, where one day each year, every dollar of the firm generated of revenue was given to charity. So not every dollar of profit, we mean every dollar of revenue. So the company picked up all the running costs, and this is my wife, Sarah.
And you? How's it going? You alright? You don't need me, do you? No.
Yeah, you should
Business
stay.
Daily News? I don't think so.
Can't
You
accept
coming
it.
today?
Unfortunately not.
Oh, what a shame.
It's a shame.
Has the weather put you off?
Well, I'm not very good with crowds. I'm a bit of a recluse, I guess.
Are you?
I get overwhelmed.
Strange
sure
profession for a recluse.
I'm sure it's going to be good fun.
It's going to be great.
Yeah.
I'm going to get a tea. Okay, so
Nice to meet you.
Tea.
So we started this project, Charity Day, 25 years ago, when the firm was very small. And we did it because it was a good way of supporting charities, doing something for the community. It started very small because the firm was very small. But we continued it every year since then, always around Christmas time, a bit before Christmas. And some years we were giving away $10 million or more to charities in the UK and internationally. And we allowed our offices generally to choose local charities. So Singapore would support Singaporean charities, American charities, and so forth. But a lot of our charitable support over the years has been towards children, medicine, and a lot of it as well towards world crisis. When there was a disaster in Haiti several years ago, we gave a big amount towards Haiti. When there was huge catastrophes in Pakistan, we can support that. And aid programs as well, we've generally given some support.
What instigates this need to be?
I think the groupers in the firm felt that of course, a business is about profit, making money, being successful, working for ourselves, working for our shareholders. But I think as well, simultaneously, more wiser, more mature people as well realise that we have, beyond that community of shareholders, staff, customers, we have a broader responsibility to our community as well. And we don't live in isolation of our community, and therefore we need to help our community where we can. And yes, working hard and making profit and paying taxes helps our community, but I think great firms go a stage beyond that and look for other ways of engagement. and our way of engagement is to put aside effectively one day a year, where the firm works completely for other causes, not for our shareholders, not for us, not for our suppliers. So it was very effective for us. We found it was a simple formula. The staff liked it. The staff's children liked it. They felt proud of their mother or father going to work not for themselves for a day. And so it's worked very well, and we've continued that still now. Although the company I originally founded, ICAP, split into two 18 months ago. I split the technology part of it from the non-technology part of it. The non-technology part I sold to a similar competitor, and they're continuing with the charity day. The other part, the technology part I run next, is continuing with the charity day as well. Our charity day this year is on the 7th of June, and it's very exciting.
You're 62 years old now. What do you like about your 60s that you find so different from your 50s?
I try not to categorize my life too much. Otherwise you think, oh my God, I'm getting really old, because it wasn't very long ago that I thought 62 was very, very old, and I don't feel very old now.
Right.
But there's no question that my life is going through another phase change, because you may well have read that Next, the business I'm the biggest shareholder in it. I kept all my shares from original founding of the business in 1986. I'm still the single biggest shareholder. I'm the chief executive. It is being bought by a big American financial group called Chicago Mercantile Exchange. It's a very, very good deal. They're paying $5.5 billion to buy our company. I mean, our company is a very good company, but it's a very smart deal by the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. So I will be joining the board of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange when this deal completes. It'll have to go to regulatory approval, but that regulatory approval will, I have no doubt, be achieved. So in 6 months' time, approximately, for the first time in 32 years, my daughter will be very pleased. I will have a boss, because for 32 years I have not had a boss. So that is a big change in my life, and in due course my role will become non-executive, so I won't be running a business, and that will free me up a lot to do other things. And I have a lot of other business interests, and which I don't run day to day. I mean, give you an example. I own a big share in a very small business called Run Breeze that makes underwear for athletes. And on Friday, just won some big awards in the UK, beating Nike and Under Armour in awards for producing specialist athletic gear. I have an emerging market investment bank that has a small office in Nairobi called Exotics, which is very successful. I have our horse breeding program is important, and we will expand we plan to build a proper stud now up in Laikipia, and hopefully the horses that are running today will go to a standard stud there. So I see the next phase of my life still working, but doing things that I enjoy, a bit of variety, traveling a bit more, doing new stuff. But I certainly see spending more time in Kenya. for sure.
I read somewhere online that they described you as the richest self-made person in the city of London. I don't know how precise that is. Nonetheless, I'm curious to find out, is there a point in your life where money just, no matter how much you make it, just doesn't make any big change in your life?
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. And to be honest with you, money, I want to say this in a nice way. I cannot spend the money I've got. It's not possible.
How much are you worth?
Well, you can look it up. You can work it out. If you go and do a bit of research and do it, you'll be able to work it out. I mean, believe you me, there are a lot of people richer than me in the world.
Absolutely.
Of course there are. You know, there are always people who are richer than you, or better looking than you, better athlete,
Faster than you.
faster than you, cleverer than you. So there are thousands of people richer in the world than me, but I've made more money than I ever thought I'd make when I started in business, more money than I need, and enough that allows me to do whatever I want. And you're absolutely right. Making money for the sake of making money doesn't interest me at all. Doing things that I enjoy doing, that I think are valuable and exciting, things that give you pleasure, breeding horses that are good, building a business in Nairobi that's successful, small things building small things that work can give you as much pleasure as big things. So I see myself remaining active and busy and involved in lots of things, but without the pressure of running a big public company listed on the stock market with several thousand employees. And one point I said I had 5,000 employees and 63 offices around the world. That's a lot of managing, and a lot of stress and a lot of time. So I want to enjoy my life some more.
If you're to get into a boat that takes you into the future, what's the one thing you'll carry with you?
What do I carry with me on my boat? As I go on my boat trip to the future, what would I take with me? I'd probably take my wife, but you'd probably say to me, I can't take my wife.
Well, you can't.
You want? I would take my wife. There you are.
Right. After 42 years just working, that's a long time. That's longer than I've lived. What would you say is the greatest lesson you've learned working for
loads of mistakes. I made a lot of mistakes in my career, but fortunately I learned from them. I think there's several. One, if you want to be successful, don't go out just to try and make money. If you are just trying to make money, you probably really won't succeed, because you're looking at the world the wrong way around. Whereas if you find a business idea or a project that you really feel passionately about, and you want to make something that really works, you want to run a hotel that's beautiful and gives perfect service and brilliant food, the clients are looked after, if you do that beautifully, you'll make money. If you so focus on doing something that creates value for the world, whatever that may be, even if it's an app for a computer or some software that really works, or you write glorious articles that people love reading. If you do that, then you can be successful. If you just get up every day saying, how am I going to make money, how am I going to make money, you very rarely do, and most of the people who are like that are pretty miserable people anyway.
Does your definition of success keep morphing at different stages of
Yes.
your life? What is it now?
Oh, success now to me is much more about being proud about things that I'm involved with, not scoring up how much. I can feel very proud. For example, I'll give you another thing I'm involved with, very interesting. I own, not all, but I own the majority of an Islamic finance business. Interesting. Based in London. It is run by a woman who is a Christian. Wallahi. And she goes to Riyadh and Qatar, and obviously she dresses appropriately, and the clients all know that she's a woman, obviously, and that she's a Christian. And she has built an unbelievable, and that impresses me and gives me a lot of satisfaction to show that your instincts can be completely wrong and she was given a CBE by the British recently. I mean, she's very courteous, very respectful, but the customers respect her because they know that she is absolutely straight, honest, professional, and knows what she is talking about.
Who's the one person you've met socially or in your line of business that really impressed you or made an impact in your life?
I'm probably, of the people I've met, probably Michael Bloomberg is the one I've most. I think he's not only been, I mean, he is a brilliant man, created a brilliant business, I mean, a properly brilliant business, but he's also a brilliant thinker, and in my opinion, could have been an outstanding president.
Do you believe in God?
Yes.
Are you spiritual or you're...
I do believe in God, yes. I don't go to church every week, but I do go to church.
Right.
I do believe in ethicality. I do believe in there is right and wrong.
If you're to do something different in how you raise your children, what would that be? Given a second stab at it.
I would say I probably spent less time with them than I should have done.
Less time?
I spent less time than I should have.
You spent less
Yeah.
time.
So if I was to do it again, I'd spend more time with them.
Spend more time. But then of course there's a dynamics of, if you spent more time, you'd not probably be where you are, right? So you're spending time at work, doing things, building something.
Yeah, maybe.
Yes, it's a bit of an I guess.
It's a bit of a, but so, but you know, all of them work, I'm pleased to say. The oldest boy in London, who is 30 next month, ran for Parliament in the last British election for the Conservative Party, thank heavens. Otherwise we would have had a bit of a domestic family argument. He didn't get elected, but he will try again, and I'm sure he'll be elected one day. The middle one, who is 28, is working for a financial technology company in London, and he is in the British Paratroop Regiment as a reservist, and my youngest is an art student and works in the fashion trade now.
Yes.
So they all work. They all.
Is that dream of yours that you've not realized?
I think there are lots of things that I would want to do, and if Sarah was saying now, she would say, now you've sold the next business and we're moving to the next stage of our life. You're in your 60s, she's in her 50s. What we should be doing now is doing things that fill our soul more. Go, for example, go to northern India, to Nepal, to feel different places, travel more to places in Africa. I've never been to Victoria Falls. I've never been to Rwanda. So let's go and enjoy that. Let's do things like take our car, drive down, something easy, the Aberdare Mountains or Naivasha, or drive to Ethiopia, see my old country. So her view is, and these things are soulful things, it's not, we're not doing it as tourists, like, I've got to tick this off and tick that off. It's just go and experience. So that's the sorts of things I want to do. I don't have a goal. I used to once want to go into politics. I wanted to become an elected politician, but I had no money and I didn't want to be a poor politician. My father was a civil servant after all, so he was not a man of wealth when he retired. And morning, Duncan.
Morning, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, my dear boy. And so my original idea is I always wanted to work in the city. I'd go into the city, make some money, then go into politics. But I suddenly realised in my 30s, 40s that I had a choice, because you can't be in politics and in business, really. So I gave up on my political ambition and focused on politics. My political ambition and focused on business. I don't regret that decision at all. But for a while I used to dream about, and I know a lot of politicians in the UK. For 4 years, I ran David Cameron's fundraising programs for the Conservative Party. So I know nearly all the senior Conservative politicians, and I often miss politics, but I'm not going into politics now.
How does one make sure that they don't get changed by money and wealth? Is it very difficult?
I guess it's difficult for me to answer that question because I don't know. I don't think money's changed me very much, but someone else might say, "Oh, Michael, stop talking rubbish. Your very life has changed. You've got 2 houses in Kenya. You don't need 2 houses in Kenya. Why have you got 2 houses in Kenya? Well, you don't live there all the time. I mean, that's changed you." I said, "Well, yeah, I couldn't do that without money. That's true, but I don't feel it's changed me as a person." I hope not. I mean, my wife keeps me very grounded. So she, was very keen, and my children as well. They are pretty grounded people. My father always had a lovely phrase which I really enjoyed. Money cannot make you happy, but it allows you to be miserable in comfort.
You sound. You mentioned your wife many times.
Yeah.
You sound like you're in love, or it must be a good thing. Second time a charm and stuff.
Yeah, it is good. She's been very, very good for me. I was married for 10 years before that, and it was a bad, sad story at the end. I mean, of course, I speak to my ex-wife, and she's fine, and she's got, she's fine in every way. But I'm so glad I didn't continue there. But no, Sarah and I have. But things like building a house together is a big issue. So we built 2 houses together in Kilifi and in Laikipia, and that's a soulful thing. Your house is part of you. What it looks like, what it feels like, it's part of you.
Right. What do you fear now?
What do I fear? The creep of age and its ability and what it constrains you. That's the only thing that I feel frightened of. Fear, not frightened of fear.
Age.
I didn't when am I still ride a horse. When am I stopping doing that?
Right.
I still we will go old one day.
If you're given, your life is taken back 20 years, but where you are, all things remaining constant, what would you do?
That's a hypothetical, and it's not fair to ask hypothetical questions.
Yes.
Do if it was taken back 20 years, I wouldn't do very much different. I wake up every day feeling happy that I'm here.
Yeah.
Who are the people you love and care for? Where are the places you love and care for? Venetia, how's the track? This is the lady who does all our horses. Kenya, horse racing in Kenya has got a tradition that goes back 100 years. And Kenya has a great equestrian tradition. And I mean, many years ago there were several racetracks in this country, not just there was one in Nakuru and Yuki and various other places, but the only one that's left operating is the Nairobi racetrack at the Ngong. It's a beautiful racetrack, really beautiful. I think it's a wonderful asset to this country to have somewhere so pretty, and we are interested in our own way in sort of thinking of helping a country, how we can help them to maintain and improve the racetrack so that the quality of racing improves, the more visitors want to go and watch it and participate, and it makes employs more people and makes a contribution to the economy, and also everything help, a bit of tourism. So, good racing is great fun.
I absolutely love the boots. Very trendy.
You know who they're made by?
No, I've seen a Williams somewhere.
These are R.M. Williams.
Okay.
And I tell you what, you should buy them online if you can. they last forever. I got boots that are 20 years old. They're the only boots I wear, and they're comfortable.
How many years old?
These aren't 20, these are relatively new.
Okay.
But I've got some that are 20 years old.
Very nice.
And I clean them myself. You need to clean them from time to time. And if you clean them, they really maintain their super R.M. Williams, the Australian.